So, the Amazon Prime series called Like a Dragon Yakuza has officially finished airing, and opinions on it are fairly mixed. Most media outlets criticized it thoroughly, while the Yakuza community itself has had an even split in opinions on it, ranging from praising the show's experimentation to condemning its existence as a whole. Now, given that my entire channel is focused on Yakuza specifically, my views on the series will likely be different than those of a dedicated J-drama enthusiast. So if you just clicked on this video to see a general grade for the show, or to see if a fan of the games would recommend it, then I'd give it a strong 6 out of 10 overall. I do think that the series is a fun watch, but the thing to keep in mind is that the story you will see in the show is in no way representative of what the games are like, which is why discourse on this adaptation will likely remain just as heated as it is now, even 10 years after its official release date had passed. Now, you might be wondering, why wouldn't the writers just adapt the story of the first game wholesale? Well, there's a few reasons for that. First off, the story of Yakuza 1 has been expanded upon and reinterpreted several times in the past 19 years, ranging from the PS2 game, to the remake with the deepened lore, to the Takashi Miike film, the stage play, even the digital comic. Even though this series of games is often praised for its cinematic approach and attention to detail in storytelling, a one-for-one adaptation would not only be redundant by nature of repetition here, but also because what makes a great video game story is not identical to what makes a good story in a J-drama, beyond the broadest of strokes that relates to the idea of adequate pacing or tone. It's been evident from day one that this will be a different take on the story, using general overviews of key characters, along with some noteworthy plot points from the games, to connect them and expand on them in ways that would benefit from a different medium being used as the vehicle to progress the story. Ideally, this would be the moments where I would cross-reference moments from the J-drama with moments from the games, but by nature of YouTube's copyright system being what it is, we'll need to omit that approach during today's discussion. Instead, I'll be going over some writing choices that caught my eye as a fan of the series, and seeing whether or not they were executed to their fullest. This also means that from this point on, you can expect heavy spoilers for both the TV series and the first game, so please proceed with caution. Like a Dragon Yakuza, despite setting out to be a brand new story, actually has moments where they try to expand on pre-established character dynamics from the games. The way Kiryu's, Nishiki's, and Yumi's interactions were shown at the very beginning in the orphanage were largely believable as a result of that. Our main kyodais have each other's backs, they're very hot-headed, and show ambitions of wanting to see what the world outside the orphanage is like. While the way the writers went about further building on this brings Kiryu's writing closer to that of someone like Ukiyo Tatsuya from the Kurohyo games, the flashbacks in Yakuza 0 and the way Kiryu acted before leaving the Dojima family could frame the show's version of him as an understandable behind-the-scenes look. Looking beyond this premise, however, there's a number of deviations that are used to plant the seeds for future narrative conflicts in classic J-drama fashion. Like having Kiryu idolize the image of the Dragon of Dojima while being annoyed at Kazuma's insistence on avoiding the Yakuza life, only to find out that it was Kazuma himself who lived through all these mistakes Kiryu was now hell-bent on repeating through his own youthful ignorance. Now, as you already know, this show has made it a point to introduce brand new characters into the mix as well, along with offering genuine characterization to individuals who were merely present by name in the games. And this was an excellent choice on paper, even if the execution differs from one cast member to the next. The addition of Miho Nishikiyama as a proper character was arguably the best example of solid execution, as it allowed Yumi to have her own analog to see how misguided ambitions can lead to one's downfall, seen in how Miho's attempts at becoming a hostess only led to her health further declining, and Yumi herself starting to despise that lifestyle and the city it was bound to. This also allows Nishiki to exhibit a comparable tragedy in the broader strokes, as his attempts at desperately following after Kiryu, without having his own goals to pursue, ultimately leads to him becoming a puppet to Dojima's plan, which ultimately claimed Miho's life, and led our beloved Kyodai to become the villain we see in the end. So, we have the Nishikiyama siblings becoming examples of the dangers an idealized, but ultimately misunderstood life can present, while Kiryu and Yumi are there to carry the burden. At least, that's one of the readings on the countless character dynamics that were present, which is where a bigger problem sadly becomes apparent. The first 2 episodes of the show, divisive though they may be, showed clear attempts at building a focused story on the show's own terms. But once episode 3 rolls around, the show starts to implement a bunch of things that feel mismatched with the pre-established pace. Throwing in a Majima fight just to sideline him until the theater square brawl in the final episode, shooting Saejima and having his survival be completely ambiguous, painting the florist as a scumbag to put him in the informant position, and a number of other additions just feel like ticking things off a proverbial list so that the adaptation doesn't feel too far removed from the source material, despite the fact that the show being an original take was the focal point of its premise to begin with. Add onto this the inconsistent writing of the brand new character Sawamura Aiko, and you'll slowly see why the initial views on the series were as negative as they were, seeing as the cutoff point for the first batch of episodes being released was essentially a turning point that tried to blend 2 approaches that were at odds with one another. Frankly, until we get to the ending of episode 5 and the entirety of episode 6, the brunt of the series' runtime can end up feeling like a disjointed affair, more often than not. Though thankfully, the series does end on a very strong note, as all the flashbacks and lingering character motivations finally make way for a focused and impactful finale despite it all. Speaking of the final episode, the only glaring issue with it, at least within the confines of the show itself, is how the survival of a number of characters is left so ambiguous, with the likes of Saejima, Aiko, Nishiki, and potentially even more that have slipped my mind, hanging over the initial sense of finality. And speaking of, the twist reveal at the end, while intriguing, feels like more of a case of baiting out a season 2 than ending on a conclusive note in the show's own right. So, as you can tell, even for those of us who try to give this show the benefit of the doubt, the complete picture will likely have you lamenting over what could have come from the initially presented experimentation, rather than judging what was present by its own merit. Though that doesn't mean that the show wasn't an entertaining watch. I personally enjoyed my time with it quite a bit, and judging by the popularity of the show on the actual streaming service, we might see a proper continuation of it at some point down the line. If that does end up happening though, there's a number of things I hope will be improved upon, which serves as a well enough segue into the next section of the video. With regards to my overall likes and dislikes on the series, I'll just go through them in quick succession here, as there is a great chance that by the time you see this particular video, an episode of the RGG cast centered around this very TV series will be out, where we'll go significantly more in depth on it. Back to the topic at hand, let's go over some of the things I didn't like about the show. There's a ton of strange writing choices present that feel like they're only included to build extra tension in the viewer. Like with how Nishiki tries to spike Kiryu's drink to make him lose a fight, rather than just asking his brother about the conundrum outright. Or how Kiryu, without elaboration, doesn't forfeit his underground match even though it could save Miho's life by ensuring funds for her organ transplant. Some of these inclusions were dealt with better than others, but the sheer amount of them will make you feel like you're watching a Mexican telenovela, by nature of how few of them are adequately elaborated upon post their execution. Other things that I disliked included the use of licensed tracks, making the series feel like an ironic meme fiesta at times, as well as the extent to which certain characters were beaten down to prove a point. Like how long the scene of Majima losing his eye lasted, with him being stomped on 1,000,000,000 times, or how we're explicitly shown Nishiki being beaten down by Dojima goons. We understand that these characters had a punishment coming for them, but showing said punishment to the extent that they have can quickly sour what could have otherwise been an impactful moment. The way it is framed now makes it all feel like an unnecessary shock factor this series can do without, because there are plenty of character interactions where the choice of words alone is enough to naturally build tension and entice the viewer. Now, what things did I actually like about the show? Quite a few of them, actually. References like Majima having the thug stance during his fight with Kiryu and Nishiki, one of the Colosseum fighters having a moveset resembling Pramuk from Yakuza 1, Nishiki's mask as the demon of Shinjuku resembling the mask of the Nikyo Consortium members, him wielding a karambit knife like Jungi in Yakuza 7, there's so many instances of little details that will really stuck out to you if you spent enough time with Yakuza 0 through 2. So between those oddities and some key character interactions benefiting from the typical minimalistic approach that the games themselves will make use of, you can tell that the intent to deliver something truly driving was there with the show. Maybe they didn't have the time or the resources to see it through to its completion, but I can't help but truly admire their effort regardless. Lastly, without outright changing anything major, what could have been improved upon in the show? Beyond everything that was stated thus far, I believe the show would have benefited from cutting down on the amount of jumps between different points in the timeline. The idea of maintaining a feeling of mystery and keeping the tension high is understandable, but the same thing could have been done without switching back and forth so frequently, as this approach only led to some important story reveals being pushed all the way back to the ending of the show, which most people never got to, due to the initial wave of negativity surrounding the first 3 episodes. Whether you love the series, utterly despise it, or are generally indifferent towards it, I believe that voicing our opinions on it in a constructive manner should be the end goal of the discourse on this show. But with how many people used its release as a scapegoat to then drag down every new RGG release as but a mere cash grab, I realized this would be a tall order. Once the initial impact passes, however, I look forward to seeing what this show's legacy will turn out to be. If you'll recall, certain RGG products that were divisive or outright despised back in the day are now just another part of the franchise with a dedicated and passionate following. Whether it be a game like Yakuza Dead Souls, the Takashi Miike adaptation of Yakuza 1, or even the now widely adored Yakuza 7. The journey this series goes through is never an easy one, but it is certainly worth experiencing. So whatever comes next, live action or otherwise, I'll welcome it with open arms. Thank you all for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed the general look at the show. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments, and feel free to suggest any other topics you'd like to see on the channel. So, until next time, take care of yourselves, and have a great day. Cheers!